4 years of silence. Then one gesture shocked the entire trial. The courtroom was a cathedral of tension. Silence thick as stone as Emily Carter stepped through the heavy doors. She looked smaller than her 20 years. Her posture taut but composed, and her right hand clenched tightly around the leash of the German shepherd walking beside her. Rex, the retired canine officer, moved in calm synchronization, his fur speckled with gray around the muzzle, the jagged scar on his flank visible through the slight movement of his coat. The scar was old but visible, just like the memories they both carried. Every pair of eyes in the courtroom followed them, but not with the pity reserved for victims. Instead, with a mixture of curiosity, awe, and the kind of hushed reverence people offer to someone about to relive something no one should ever have to. Emily's past was no longer a secret. 4 years earlier, she had survived an attempted abduction that changed everything. She had been just 16, walking home from school like any normal teen, when a man pulled up beside her in a dark sedan and smiled in the way only predators can smile. "Want to see the puppies in the pack," he had said, voice sugary and calm. But before she could respond, a familiar voice called her name, Mrs. Gertrude, the elderly widow who lived across the street. That voice saved her. The man's smile twisted. He grabbed her wrist, just for a moment. But Emily pulled away and ran until her legs collapsed in her driveway. She never spoke another word. PTSD, severe trauma-induced mutism, night terrors, panic attacks. Doctors tried therapy, medication, even immersive VR treatments. Nothing helped, until Rex. He was brought in by a trauma rehabilitation specialist one last try before inpatient care was considered. Rex wasn't just any dog. He had served 6 years in the Canine division, trained in rescue, protection, and scent recognition. He had once taken down a suspect armed with a hunting knife to the chest. The scar proved it, retired due to his injury. Rex had been scheduled for euthanasia before a trainer, Dr. Hannah LeClaire, intervened. Rex had seen pain. Perhaps that's why he recognized it in Emily when no human could. The first meeting was quiet. He didn't bark or wag. He simply sat down near her, facing slightly away, like a sentinel waiting for permission. Emily looked at him but said nothing. She didn't need to. Over time, she began responding to him. A touch on the head, a flick of her fingers, a nod. Within months, she developed a system of hand signals, taught by her therapist, that only Rex truly understood. He wasn't just her service animal, he was her translator, her lifeline. No one else ever saw the silent conversations they shared. One spring, during a particularly dark episode, Emily locked herself in the bathroom and swallowed half a bottle of pills. But before it was too late, Rex slammed his body against the door and barked so violently that her mother came running. That bark saved her life. From then on, Emily carried Rex's leash like a lifeline. Then, it happened again. Not to her, but to another girl, 8 years old, snatched from her yard by a man in a black van. The method was chillingly familiar. Lure, grab, disappear. The girl was still missing. The news was enough to push Emily back into therapy. But this time, she didn't collapse inward. She asked to testify. The case was built on threads. No DNA, no direct eyewitness testimony. Only the girl's sweater left behind in a van traced to Richard Hale, a clean-cut software engineer with no record. His lawyer spun the narrative of misunderstanding. A forgotten donation to a thrift store. No intent, no proof, no voice. But Emily was the voice, even if she couldn't speak. When Judge Sullivan approved Rex's presence during testimony, citing medical necessity, it caused a small media frenzy. But what mattered was this moment. Emily sat down in the witness box. Her fingers trembled slightly. Rex sat at her side. Richard Hale glanced at her. His smile was polite, but his eyes flicked briefly to the dog. He didn't recognize her. That was his mistake. Emily closed her eyes, inhaled, and made a subtle gesture with her right hand, 2 fingers touching her thigh, then flicking outward. Rex snapped to attention. His ears rose. His body stiffened. He let out a low, guttural growl that sent a visible shiver through the courtroom. The judge banged his gavel once, startled. "We'll take a 10-minute recess," he said, Behind the judge's stern voice was confusion and curiosity. In the chambers, the assistant prosecutor, Jenna Morrigan, approached Emily. Was that the signal? She whispered. Emily nodded. What did he smell? Jenna wondered aloud. That's when Rex approached Emily again, gently nuzzling her hand. Another subtle signal. The room quieted. Then Jenna spoke to the judge privately. Within the hour, they obtained court approval to test old day samples against items taken from Richard's home in a prior unrelated burglary case. The results a match partial, but strong enough to tie Richard to another attempted abduction 4 years prior. But the smoking gun came from an unlikely place. The next day, Emily returned to court. When she sat, she again made the same signal. Rex responded the same way, another low growl, aimed directly at Richard Hale. This time, Hale's cool broke. His hand began tapping on the bench. His foot bounced. Then he whispered something under his breath. Not realizing the microphone at his table was still active. Little girl, stop screaming. Emily's head jerked up. Her eyes widened in horror. That was the exact phrase he had used when grabbing her. No one but her and her memory could have known. Silence crashed over the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. What did he just say? Within seconds, transcripts confirmed the words. Jenna leaned toward the judge. I think we have our confession. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled. The trial was no longer about circumstantial evidence. It was about a man who just whispered the very phrase that tied him to 2 attempted abductions. A search warrant was issued that same night. Soil samples from under Hale's vehicle matched a rare, protected forest reserve, one known to host abandoned ranger cabins. A task force, led by Detective Farrow and guided by Rex, tracked the location. What they found was devastating and miraculous. Hidden in the basement of an old, decaying cabin was a steel-reinforced crate. Inside the missing girl, cold, dehydrated, but alive. She cried when they lifted her out. And Rex, he sat beside her, silent, unmoving, eyes locked on her face like a guardian. The next morning, Richard Hale pled guilty to all charges. Life in prison, no parole. 6 cases reopened, 3 cold cases closed, but for Emily, the closure was personal. That night, back at home, Rex curled up beside her on the bed for the first time in weeks. Emily looked down at him, tears in her eyes. Thank you, Rex. I'm okay now. Her voice cracked, but she said it. For the first time in years, she spoke. Not with hands, not with glances, with her voice. Rex blinked once, then placed his head on her lap. She stroked the scar along his side and whispered, We finished the first part. But there's more to do, and somewhere into the quiet, Rex's tail thumped once against the bed. They both knew it was just the beginning. The days after the trial passed in a blur. The headlines faded, the reporters moved on, and the world returned to its routines. But for Emily Carter, silence took on a new form. It was no longer a shield, it was an aftermath. She lay awake at night, her room lit only by the dim blue glow of her alarm clock, staring at the ceiling with Rex curled up beside her. He had always been the guardian at her gate, the only soul who understood her in total stillness. And now, even as her voice had returned, she found herself choosing silence when others around her begged for words. She had spoken in court. She had spoken to the girl who was rescued. She had even spoken to her mother afterward, shakily thanking her for believing in her when she had barely believed in herself. But the rest of the world, she wasn't ready yet. At the university, her professors gave her space. They didn't call on her during lectures. They let her submit written responses instead of speaking aloud. Some students approached her awkwardly in the cafeteria, some out of admiration, some out of misplaced curiosity. Are you the girl with the dog? Was it really the same man? Can you talk now? She smiled politely, but kept her distance. She was used to distance. She had lived in it for 4 years. The only exception came on a Thursday afternoon when she returned to Dr. Leclerc's office for the first time since the trial. The woman who had introduced her to Rex, who had taught her the language of trust, met her with a quiet smile and a soft, "Welcome back." Emily sat on the couch, Rex lying at her feet like he belonged to the furniture. "You did something extraordinary," Dr. Leclerc said after a long silence. You didn't just speak. You gave someone else their voice back. 2. Emily blinked, then nodded. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers twitching slightly in old habits tap. Rest, flick, tap again, and now, the doctor continued. It's time we talk about what you want to do next. The questions sat in the room like an unopened letter. Emily hadn't thought beyond the trial, beyond the rescue, beyond the haunting memory of Richard Hale's whisper. I don't know, she said finally, her voice thin but present. That's okay, Dudley Clare replied. You've earned time to not know. Emily looked at Rex, who lifted his head at the mention of her voice. She reached down and scratched behind his ear. I don't want this to be the end, she said, of my story that night. She pulled out her old sketchbook, one she hadn't touched in over a year. It was frayed at the edges, filled with drawings from dark days, shadowy figures, cages, broken staircases leading to nowhere. But between those pages, she had also drawn Rex dozens of times sitting, watching, guarding, sometimes with wings, sometimes with an eye, a crown, always with that same patient gaze. She turned to a blank page and began drawing again. Not Rex this time, but the little girl from the cabin. Safe, wrapped in a blanket, holding a stuffed bear. Rex in the background, not as a hero, but as a steady shadow. The next day, she took the drawing to the university's trauma center and handed it to the receptionist. For her, she said, not needing to explain. They knew who she meant over the following weeks. Emily began spending time at the center not as a patient, but as a listener. She didn't speak much, but when she did, it was with care. She met others who had been through things they couldn't put into words. Abuse, loss, violence, silence. And in each story, she recognized pieces of herself. One afternoon, while helping with a group session involving animal therapy, a young woman named Kara sat beside her on the grass. Kara was 19, with tear-streaked eyes and shaking hands. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she whispered, I lost my brother. He took his own life last year. Emily didn't flinch. She waited. Kara wiped her nose. Sometimes I think I should have noticed, that I should have done something. Emily reached out and took her hand. You survived, she said softly. That's already something. Kara looked at her, surprised. How do you talk like that? Well, calm. Emily smiled faintly. Because I've been where you are. Maybe not the same pain, but the same silence. Later that week, Kara brought a friend, then 2 more. Soon Emily was hosting unofficial circles in the garden behind the center. They called it Quiet Hour, where no one had to speak unless they wanted to, where feelings were drawn, written, or simply held in hand. Rex, of course, became the group's honorary guardian. He laid his head in their laps, rested beside their feet, and listened in the way only dogs can, with full presence and no judgment. But Rex was aging. Emily could see it in his movements, slower than before, and in the cloudiness behind his eyes. The vet confirmed what she feared: congestive heart failure. He may have a few months, the doctor said, or a few weeks. Emily walked home that evening in silence, Rex by her side, and she whispered, You don't have to stay for me. You already saved me. Rex blinked at her, then leaned gently into her leg as if to say, I'm not finished yet. In the final weeks of his life, Rex did everything he had always done. He followed Emily to campus, attended her sessions, even joined her at a small speaking event where she shared her story publicly for the first time. Her voice trembled, but she spoke. I survived because someone interrupted the silence. She told the room, I stayed alive because this dog gave me permission to speak again. And now, I want to give that permission to others. The applause was quiet, respectful, not the roar of crowds, but the acknowledgement of something deeply true. The next morning, Rex didn't get up. He lay in his bed, breathing shallow, eyes following her every movement. Emily lay beside him, her hand resting on his chest, counting each rise and fall. It's okay, she whispered. You can rest now. And he did. The garden behind her house became his resting place. They buried him beneath the oak tree, with his favorite blanket and his old police badge resting on his chest. Emily hung his collar on the lowest branch, where it swayed gently in the breeze like wind chimes of memory. People came, students, professors, trauma survivors, therapists, and even a few strangers. They brought flowers, notes, small toys. One girl left a drawing of a dog with wings. Another boy placed a folded letter under the tree, titled, "Thank you for listening." In her room that night, Emily stared at the empty bed beside hers. The silence wasn't heavy this time. It was peaceful. A few weeks later, she returned to the shelter where Rex had first visited years ago during therapy demonstrations. A new litter of puppies had arrived. One of them, a small, wiry German Shepherd mix with a crooked ear, climbed into her lap and immediately fell asleep. Emily laughed, the sound bright and unexpected. She looked into the puppy's eyes. "Your name is Echo," she said, "because sometimes voices don't disappear. They echo." And in that moment, for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like someone who had been broken. She felt like someone who had survived and was ready to speak for others still learning how. Emily Carter sat in the garden behind the trauma center, a mug of tea warming her hands as the crisp autumn air blew gently through the trees. Echo, her new pup, now several months old, lay stretched across her feet, gnawing on a stuffed squirrel with enough enthusiasm to make the watching students laugh quietly. It had been 3 months since Rex's passing, 3 months of learning how to function without the silent protector who had walked beside her for so many years. In those early days, it felt like trying to breathe with only one lung. But now, in moments like this, she could feel the beginning of something else, a new kind of air. Thinner, perhaps, but breathable. Echo was different from Rex in nearly every way. Where Rex had been stoic and watchful, Echo was mischievous and bounding with energy, always chasing butterflies, chewing on slippers, and sneaking onto her bed when she wasn't looking. But sometimes, when Echo rested his head against her chest, Emily could swear she felt something familiar, something steady pulsing beneath the surface. Not a replacement, never that, but a continuation, a memory carried forward on 4 younger paws. That afternoon, a new face joined the quiet hour circle. A young man, maybe 21, with haunted eyes and a tight grip on the sleeves of his jacket. He sat a little apart from the group, his gaze locked on the horizon. Emily approached him slowly, Echo trotting beside her. "Hi," she said softly, crouching nearby but not too close. "I'm Emily." He glanced at her, then at the puppy. "You're the girl from the trial," he said. Not a question, a statement. Emily nodded. He stared at the grass. "I don't talk about it. What happened to me?" "Not really." "You don't have to," she replied. "We're not here to talk. We're just here to be." He didn't respond, but Echo took a step forward, nudged the boy's knee, and dropped the stuffed squirrel in his lap. The boy blinked, surprised. Then unexpectedly he smiled. The next week, he returned, and the next. He never said much, but he always sat a little closer to the group. He always let Echo rest his chin on his foot. And once, when Emily read aloud from a book of survivor poems, she caught him wiping his eyes with his sleeve. That moment stayed with her. Every breakthrough, no matter how small, mattered. She had learned that the hard way. It wasn't always about loud victories. Sometimes survival was quiet, shaped like a dog's head resting on your lap or a voice returning in a whisper. Later that month, Emily was invited to speak at a regional trauma and recovery conference. The invitation made her stomach twist into knots. The idea of standing in front of hundreds of strangers, telling her story, the kidnapping attempt. The silence. The courtroom felt like peeling open an old wound. She almost declined, but then she remembered the boy in the jacket and the letter from the rescued girl. And Rex. She accepted. The night before the conference, she couldn't sleep. She sat on her bedroom floor with Echo curled beside her, the speech in her lap. Her hands trembled, just like they had in the courtroom. But this time, she wasn't facing her predator. She was facing possibility. She whispered the first lines aloud. Her voice cracked, but it held. The next day, she stood on stage beneath the soft glow of white lights, her hands gripping the podium. She took a deep breath. 4 years ago, she began, I stopped speaking, not because I had nothing to say, but because I didn't believe anyone could hear me. The room fell into silence. She continued, voice steadying with each word. I didn't speak when a man grabbed my wrist. I didn't speak when I ran home and collapsed in the driveway. I didn't speak in the therapist's office, or the hospital, or even to my mother. But there was one creature who listened without words. She paused, then smiled softly. He saved me, not just from the man who tried to take me, but from the silence that came after. She shared how Rex had responded to her signals, how he had warned the courtroom, how he had guided the investigators to the forest, how he had led them to the little girl trapped in the basement. That dog wasn't just a service animal. He was a translator of pain, a guardian of truth. She spoke of recovery, of regression, of the days when brushing her teeth felt like climbing a mountain. She spoke of drawing pictures instead of saying how she felt, of learning to trust her hands before she trusted her voice. And now, she said, voice clear and ringing, I'm here, speaking not just for myself, but for every survivor still finding their way out of silence. When she finished, the room remained quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, applause broke out. It wasn't thunderous, but it was full, an embrace of sound that washed over her like sunlight. Afterward, people approached her with tears in their eyes. A teacher from a rural school told her how many of her students had faced similar darkness. A therapist thanked her for reminding them that therapy isn't always verbal. And a young woman, no older than Emily herself, hugged her tightly and whispered, "You said what I never could." Emily cried in the car on the way home, not from sadness, but from release. Something had shifted inside her, a weight lifted. At home, Echo greeted her at the door with a wagging tail and a slipper in his mouth. She dropped to her knees, hugged him tightly, and whispered, "We did it." The next day, she met with Dr. Leclerc and asked about transferring into the graduate program for trauma psychology. "You want to become a therapist?" the doctor asked, smiling. Emily nodded. "I want to help others find their way back, like you helped me." Dr. Leclerc leaned forward. "Then we'll begin the paperwork." Over the following months, Emily balanced her undergrad completion with volunteer work and training. She read endlessly on trauma theory, animal therapy, neuroplasticity. She studied not just how people break, but how they heal. She wrote papers about the power of nonverbal communication, citing her own experience with Rex. Her professors took note. One recommended her for a fellowship. Another asked her to co-author a study. It was during one of those study sessions, late at night in the library, that she stumbled upon a quote, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." She copied it down, taped it to her laptop, and read it every morning before class. One rainy afternoon, she received another letter, this one from the parents of the girl Rex had helped rescue. It included a photo, the girl, smiling in a new school uniform, holding hands with her younger brother. On the back, the words, "Thank you. You gave us back our daughter." Emily cried again, but it was a good kind of crying, cleansing, affirming. That night, she took Echo for a walk through the same park where, years ago, she had refused to go alone. The trees whispered above them, and the wet pavement glistened under the street lamps. She paused at a bench and sat down. Echo jumped up beside her, still small enough to curl into her lap. "You're going to be great. You know," she whispered. "You're already great." The wind shifted, carrying with it a familiar scent, something woodsy, faintly sweet. For a moment, she closed her eyes and imagined Rex sitting beside her, scar and all, watching over them. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she believed in echoes. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet, she knew his spirit hadn't left. It had simply passed the leash forward. Emily adjusted her cardigan and scanned the community center lobby for the name on her clipboard. It was her first day officially assisting at the Youth Trauma Outreach Program, a hands-on part of her graduate fellowship, and her stomach fluttered with anticipation and a hint of nervous energy. Echo sat patiently at her feet, his now larger frame still every bit as gentle and alert. The children had already gravitated toward him when she walked in, their tentative hands reaching for his fur, their eyes widening with wonder when he licked their palms or dropped a toy at their feet. The receptionist waved her over. "You're with our new intake today," she said. 14-year-old girl, just transferred from foster care. Name's Mia. Bit closed off, but sharp. You'll like her." Emily nodded. She was used to closed off. She had been closed off. In fact, she was probably the blueprint for it. She walked down the hallway toward the intake room. Echo at her side. The door creaked slightly as she opened it. Inside, a girl with dark braids and a backpack still slung over one shoulder sat stiffly in a plastic chair, arms crossed, eyes filled with defiance. Emily recognized that look instantly, the shielded gaze of someone expecting to be dismissed, judged, or pitied. "Hi, Mia," Emily said, voice even and soft. "I'm Emily. I'm here to walk with you through today. You don't have to do anything you don't want to." Mia didn't respond. She flicked her eyes toward Echo, then away again. "That's your dog?" she asked after a long pause. Emily smiled. "His name's Echo. He helps me with work. He's kind of the expert." Mia studied him. "He's weird looking," she muttered, though her tone was more curious than cruel. "His ears don't match." "No, they don't," Emily agreed. "That's what makes him special." Another pause. "Did he used to be a police dog or something?" "No, but his mentor was. His name was Rex. He helped a lot of people, including me." Mia tilted her head. "Is he dead?" Emily hesitated. "Yes, but he trained Echo well." That seemed to land somewhere inside the girl. She set her backpack down. "I don't like therapists," she said. "They always want to talk about stuff." "I'm not a therapist yet," Emily replied. "And we don't have to talk unless you want to. We can just sit." So they did. 15 minutes passed in silence, filled only with the scratching of Echo's paw on the carpet and the occasional hum of air conditioning. Then Mia shifted. "So, why are you here, I mean? Why this job?" Emily looked at her, surprised by the directness. "Because someone once helped me when I didn't think I deserved it. And because I know what it's like to be afraid of your own voice." Mia frowned. "What do you mean?" Emily drew in a slow breath. "I didn't speak for almost 4 years, not a word. After something bad happened to me. It wasn't until I met Rex Echo's mentor that I began to come back." Mia didn't speak for a long moment. "People think I'm trouble," she finally muttered. "They don't say it, but I can tell." Emily shook her head. "I don't." Mia's voice cracked a little. "They gave me this new name in the system. A number. Like I'm an object, not a person." Emily leaned forward. "Do you want to tell me your real name?" Mia hesitated. "It's Amira. My mom named me that, but no one's called me that in a long time." Emily smiled. "Amira is beautiful. Would you like me to call you that from now on?" The girl's lips quivered. She nodded. A week later, Amira showed up for group therapy. She didn't say much, but she sat beside Emily and let Echo rest his head on her lap. In her second week, she brought a drawing of a girl standing beside a lopsided dog with one ear bent. In her third week, she spoke in front of the group for the first time, reading a short poem she had written. It was about a caged bird watching the sky. Emily clapped the loudest, but change wasn't linear. There were bad days. One afternoon, Amira lashed out, throwing a book across the room when a counselor suggested she revisit her trauma timeline. Emily found her outside, sitting on the curb, knees pulled to her chest. Echo sat beside her like a statue. "I'm not who people think I am," Amira whispered. "I'm angry all the time, and I don't want to be, but I can't stop it." Emily sat down beside her. "Anger is loud grief," she said quietly, "and you've lost a lot." Amira wiped her nose. "It feels like no one remembers I'm just a kid." "I remember," Emily said, "and you don't have to be fixed to be worthy of love." That was the day Amira asked if she could help train Echo. Over the following month, Emily guided her through simple commands, praise techniques, and reward systems. Amira picked it up quickly. She even laughed once when Echo tried to bark with a toy in his mouth and sounded like a squeaky door. That laugh echoed in Emily's chest for hours, outside of work. Emily continued her studies. She was deep into thesis writing. Her topic focused on the role of canine-assisted therapy in adolescent trauma recovery. Her advisor said it was one of the most grounded and emotionally intelligent papers he had ever reviewed. She credited Rex, and Echo, and Amira. One evening, while reviewing case notes, Emily's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She opened it cautiously. "Hi, I don't know if you remember me. My name is Lily. You helped rescue my sister 2 years ago. I just wanted you to know she's doing okay. She still sleeps with a nightlight, but she smiles now. She talks again. She wants to be a vet someday. Thank you. Emily sat there staring at the screen, tears brimming in her eyes. She forwarded the message to Dr. Leclerc with the simple line, "This is why we do it." That night, she told Echo the story again about Rex, about the trial, about the girl in the cabin. Echo licked her hand, tail wagging softly. "You're part of this now, too," she whispered. One morning, Amira arrived early. She was holding a manila envelope tightly. "I made something," she said, "for him." She handed Emily a drawing. It showed Rex and Echo standing side by side, both looking out over a field of stars. Above them, in hand-lettered script, were the words, "Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear fur." Emily hugged her tightly. She framed the drawing and placed it in the community center's main hall. That weekend, they held a small dedication ceremony in Rex's corner, a quiet reading space filled with books, beanbags, and therapy dogs. Emily spoke for a few minutes, her voice steady and sure. "Rex didn't just save lives," she said. "He gave people permission to heal." And now we continue his work with Echo, with each other, and with every voice that dares to return from silence. The applause was soft, like rainfall. Amira sat in the front row, clutching a certificate that read Junior Canine Therapy Assistant. She wore a proud smile, and for the first time since they'd met, Emily saw in her something bright, something unshackled. Later that evening, as the center quieted down, Emily stood alone in Rex's corner. She traced her fingers along the edge of the drawing. Echo lay nearby, watching her with calm eyes. "Thank you for starting this," she whispered. "I promise I'll carry it forward. And somewhere, in the quiet." She imagined Rex standing tall, his ears alert, his gaze steady, watching them both and approving. The air was cool and steady that morning, sunlight dappling through the windows of the trauma center's main hallway as Emily walked toward Rex's corner, with Echo trailing quietly behind her. The center had grown in ways she never could have imagined when she first walked in as a volunteer, unsure of her place, haunted by her own past, still whispering words like survival and healing as if they were distant galaxies. Now she was here as a full-time trauma counselor, her name newly etched on a plaque outside the door that read Emily Carter, M.A., Trauma Recovery Specialist. Echo had grown too, both in size and reputation. He was a certified therapy dog now, known by name among the kids, the staff, and even the local elementary school that had recently invited Emily and him to speak at a school-wide resilience assembly. He had become a symbol not of perfection, but of persistence. Inside Rex's corner, the morning group was already gathered. Amira, now a peer mentor in training, Jonah, a soft-spoken boy who only recently stopped flinching when doors closed too loudly, Lena, who liked to draw birds with wings that sparkled, and James, who hadn't spoken a word in 2 months but always sat near Echo. "Good morning," Emily said gently, taking her seat. "We're going to start today a little differently. I want to tell you all a story about a girl who was afraid to speak, about a dog who listened, and about how sometimes the smallest signals can change everything." The kids leaned in, their usual chatter softening. Emily took a deep breath and began. She told them about the courtroom, about how Rex had once sat beside her, rigid and growling, when a man who had hurt many pretended to be innocent. She told them about the cabin in the woods, the little girl who was rescued, the way the air had felt when they opened that basement door. She told them about the quiet afterward, the aching kind of quiet that follows storms, and how it was only through the softest gestures, the subtlest touches, that her voice had come back. She told them that healing wasn't loud, it wasn't linear, and it wasn't always fast. But it was possible. When she finished, she looked at them, at their eyes wood with understanding, at their hands resting more calmly in their laps, at Echo laying still with his head raised as if listening not to the words but to the meaning behind them. "Now," she said softly, "it's your turn, one by one." They spoke, not all with words, but with drawings, with movements, with notes passed hand to hand. James didn't speak aloud, but he nodded when asked if he felt safe here. That alone made Emily's chest tighten with something more powerful than pride. It was something closer to reverence. After group, Amira stayed behind. She had grown into herself in the last year, no longer hiding behind her hoodie, now wearing a bright yellow beanie she claimed made her feel like a spotlight. "They listen to you," she said to Emily. "But more than that, they believe you." "That's because I believe them," Emily replied. "It starts with one person willing to listen." Amira hesitated. "I got an offer, an internship, at a center in Portland that works with kids like me. They have a canine therapy program." Emily's heart skipped. "That's incredible. Are you going to take it? I'm scared," Amira admitted. "But yeah, I think I am." Emily smiled. "Fear means it matters." That night, Emily sat in her apartment, her window cracked open to let in the soft sounds of evening wind brushing against leaves, a distant car horn, and the rhythmic breathing of Echo sleeping beside the couch. She held an old collar in her lap, Rex's collar. It was worn and faded, the metal tag scratched beyond recognition, but the leather still held its shape. She had never quite figured out what to do with it. She had thought about burying it, framing it, carrying it, but tonight she just held it. "You did good," she whispered into the quiet. "I hope you'd be proud." In her dreams, she saw Rex standing in a field beneath a sky filled with stars, his form solid and strong, his scar no longer a wound but a badge. Echo stood beside him, smaller, younger, his tail wagging as Rex leaned in close and touched noses. Like passing a torch, Emily awoke with tears on her cheeks. The next morning, she received a call. A girl had gone missing 2 towns over, 10 years old. Similar method lured from her front yard, a black van seen in the area. The police were searching, but so far, they had nothing. Emily froze. It felt like being pulled backward in time. But this time, she didn't collapse. She asked for the detective's name. She asked to volunteer Echo's help. She gathered a team. Within 24 hours, she was standing beside a search party in the woods. Echo at her side, wind in her face, memory and instinct surging through her. Echo paused near a clearing. His body stiffened, his ears perked. He turned toward a slope leading to an abandoned barn. Emily followed. They found her curled beneath hay, scared and shivering, but alive. Echo lay down beside her while Emily called it in. She held the girl's hand until help arrived. That night, the headlines read, "Therapy Dog Leads Search Team to Missing Girl." But Emily didn't care about the headlines. She cared about the way the girl had looked at her like she was safe for the first time in days. Back home, Echo received a new badge from the police department, the mayor himself kneeling to shake Emily's hand. "Martin, whatever you're doing," he said, "keep doing it. The world needs more of it." In the following months, Emily helped open a second trauma support center, modeled after Rex's corner. She called it the Signal Room, a place where even the quietest cries would be heard. Survivors came from everywhere. Some sent letters, others sent drawings. One little boy mailed her a clay model of a dog with wings and wrote, "Thank you for finding my sister." Years later, she stood on a stage at a national mental health conference, Echo sitting calmly beside her as always, while she received an award for her contribution to trauma-informed care and canine-assisted healing. Her speech was short, but every word deliberate. "I was once a girl who thought no one would hear me, but one dog did, and because he listened, I began to believe I was worth saving. Every time someone walks into our center, I remember that moment, and I offer them the same thing I was given a chance to speak, even if it starts with silence." When she stepped down from the stage, Echo nuzzled her hand. Her fingers tapped twice against his fur, a signal. His tail thumped once in response. At home that night, as rain tapped softly against the window, she took out the collar again. This time, she placed it gently into a memory box alongside a photo of Rex, one of Echo as a puppy, and a printed copy of the first letter the rescued girl had ever sent her. She closed the box, not to forget but to honor. Echo curled up beside her, and she whispered, "Rest now, boy. We'll keep going, one signal at a time." And in the quiet, filled with echoes of bark, breath, and healing, Emily Carter finally allowed herself to feel not like a survivor, but like a beginning.